I'd like to call to order the December 11th City Commission Special Joint Meeting with the Multi-Modal Transportation Board. It is 6:06 p.m. on December 11th. We are meeting at the DPS Conference Room at 851 South Eaton Street in Birmingham. Would everyone please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Brown, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Clint Ballard.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Anthony Long.
Absent.
Commissioner Andrew Haig.
Here.
Commissioner Brad Host.
Here.
Commissioner Bill Pope. Commissioner Kevin Kozlowski. Commissioner Therese Long. Here. Gordon Davies. Mark Doolittle.
Here.
Laura England.
Here.
Patrick Hilbert.
Here.
David Hawker. Josh Doboritsky.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to open the floor to public comment. City of Birmingham welcomes public comment and limited at the mayor's discretion to allow for an efficient meeting. The commission will not participate in a question and answer session and will take no action on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. In fact, we'll take no action on any item today since it's a workshop. The public can speak to agenda items as they occur when the presiding officer opens the floor to the public. When recognized by the presiding officer, state your name for the record and direct all comments or questions to the presiding officer. Is there anyone in the room who would like to make a comment? Anyone online who would like to make a comment? Use the raise your hand function if you would like to. Okay, seeing none, let's move on. So we're here to discuss the Multi-Modal Transportation Board and its scope as defined in our city ordinances. And I think I'm going to turn to the city staff first for a report.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. So welcome everybody. We're here tonight for a joint meeting of the City Commission and the Multi-Modal Transportation Board. Thank you everybody for arranging your schedules to make this happen. I'm going to give a brief verbal presentation, if you will, a staff introduction, sort of some history, both recent and past, of how we got here tonight. I'm going to try to remain brief, but we have new commissioners and even new multimodal board members, and then for the benefit of the public, I do want to cover some history. And so, you know, just as a preface from the planning department's perspective, as was kind of laid out in your memo ahead of tonight, we feel we're facing an opportunity here to modernize the city's approach to multimodal transportation planning. And so, traveling way back to 2011, which is where the genesis of this Multi-Modal Transportation Board started based on our research. Back then in 2011, the concept of complete streets was a relatively new concept that was kind of coming, you know, into cities knowing. And so in 2011, the City of Birmingham, the City Commission, passed a complete streets resolution. And the reason for the resolution was it was passed to in support of multimodal transportation planning and with the hopes of improving travel choices in this city. And with that resolution, they directed city staff to develop a set of proposed policies and procedures to implement the complete streets practices. Following that 2011 resolution, the city then drafted and adopted a multimodal transportation plan, which was adopted in 2013. And then after the adoption of that plan, they created the Multi-Modal Transportation Board, and that was in 2014. And something we that was news to planning in our research and we felt was really important to emphasize is that when they created this current multimodal transportation board and the enabling ordinance, what they did was they replaced they had an existing board, which was called the Traffic and Safety Board, and that was active as far back as 1963. So this is like the dawning of the age of the automobile and all the conflict it created. And so they actually replaced that board with the Multimodal Transportation Board. And so the current, the ordinance language for the Multimodal Transportation Board, which as you all know is Chapter 110, Article 2 of the Birmingham Code of Ordinances, that exists today as a modified version of the former Traffic and Safety Board's ordinance language. The Traffic and Safety Board was an advisory board, and the staff liaison was the police chief. As you can guess from the name, it was heavily focused on traffic, and which relates predominantly to the use and regulation of passenger vehicles. And so when they created the Multimodal Transportation Board, what they did was they shifted, they attempted to shift the emphasis of the board a little bit away from traffic towards this new idea of complete street policies. And they codified those policies into the ordinance, and they removed the word traffic entirely. So I believe you won't find that in today's ordinance. Welcome.
Sorry, like.
We have David here and Gordon there.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so with that new board, they added some additional liaisons. The liaisons to the new board and the board today are, they also tried to reflect those principles by adding in the city planner and the city engineer alongside the police chief or his delegate. And so in addition to those staff liaisons, we also have support from consultants, Fleece and Vandenbrink and Sinclair Consulting Group. And since 2014, we've actually accomplished, quite a bit. Not everything in the plan, of course, but we have accomplished, improving a lot of what we set out to do in the first place. We've continued the commitment to safe and convenient environment for pedestrians. We've also installed several miles of bike lanes, introduced new bicycle infrastructure like bike racks and repair stations, and in addition to, we're also even currently providing more space and shelter for transit users. And some of that work has definitely taken place at the Multimodal Transportation Board itself, but I think it's also important to note that some of that progress has happened administratively and has not even required the input of the board. And so again, just to reiterate, at the time this board was created, which was over a decade ago, the landscape was very different for pedestrians and cyclists in transportation planning. And that's just to say that when you have an ordinance that's 10 plus years old that is causing struggle for people, it becomes prudent then to reconsider the language of the ordinance altogether. Is it serving the city? Especially when the topic is something so rapidly changing as multimodal transportation. I mean, we've seen trends come and go just in the last few years. And so, as far as the original purpose of the creation of the board with that history, which, as I said, was improving the travel choices, ensuring that all users of the road are considered in street design, and implementing policies and procedures to enact that consideration, I would argue that the original goal has been achieved. So today, cyclists and pedestrians are now considered in every city project as routine practice. City administration has implemented policies and procedures that consider cyclists and pedestrians in all road improvement projects. We have a different set of staff now than we did back then. That's not to say anything disparaging about them, but city staff today is very eager to provide and improve this infrastructure for all users of the road. It's something that everybody understands, that we all get around in multiple different forms of transportation every day. We're not taking our car everywhere all the time. And then we also, as I mentioned before, we employ our traffic consultants through Fleece and Vandenbrink, and they are professional traffic engineers. That is their job, to design roads for everyone. And so, you know, I just submit that we have the standards in place and we have the traffic professionals advising us. We don't necessarily need to rehash every road project in committee. Fast forward to today meaning August 2025, this year. So the City Commission moved to place a moratorium on all future meetings of the Multi-Modal Transportation Board, and the reasoning for that was to allow the City Commission to review and scrutinize Chapter 110, Article 2 of the Birmingham City Code of Ordinances in order to examine and clarify the scope of authority and purpose and duties of the Multi-Modal Transportation Board. And so then after that, on September 8th, the City Commission held a discussion on the ordinance. It was a brief discussion, and after some brief discussion, they also moved to let the Multi-Modal Transportation Board meet and discuss, you know, their purpose and discuss what they would like to say at a future meeting, a future joint meeting of the Multi-Modal Transportation Board and the City Commission. So then that meeting was held on October 23rd, 2025. It was a special meeting of the Multi-Modal Transportation Board. It was a really good discussion and a really productive conversation. All of the current members of the board were in attendance, and what you have, in addition to your agenda, what you have in front of you is a set of notes that were taken at that meeting. And so just to be clear, they're not minutes. You have the draft minutes in your agenda packet, I believe. The notes are just simply they utilize note-taking at the meeting as a tool to reach some general consensus, and they requested that the City Commission have the notes today, so I provided them for you as well. So now, today, this joint meeting of the City Commission and Multi-Modal Transportation Board fulfills the second part of the September 8th City Commission directive by providing a meeting for the two bodies to meet and discuss. And so, as I wrap up this introduction, been speaking a little while now, I'm going to wrap it up here. As I wrap it up, I also want to take some accountability on behalf of the city for the fact that we have been bringing tasks to the Multi-Modal Transportation Board that, in our minds as city planners, do not fit the goals of this board, especially over the past few years. Many of the items we've asked this board to consider, maybe even since its creation in 2014, are vehicle-centric, and they do not necessarily belong with a board that's meant to advocate for additional travel choices and for the needs and safety of the bicyclists and pedestrians. And so, you know, I think that's part of the reason for some of the struggle, and so that responsibility does lie with city staff, city administration, so I just want to recognize that. So for all of these reasons that I've talked about, it's time we feel to really take a deep dive into kind of reconsidering the whole thing. Like, what are we doing with the Multi-Modal Transportation Board? So obviously we're here tonight to discuss the purpose of the Multi-Modal Transportation Board, the processes we use to achieve that purpose, with the goal of eventually staff will construct a smooth ordinance and process that removes any confusion or consternation, so we can continue the important work of multimodal transportation planning in the city. And so, just as my final sort of prologue to the discussion you all are about to have, I'm just going to submit a few things for consideration. As I stated, we feel the problem that originally necessitated the creation of the Multimodal Transportation Board, as originally stated, has been solved. At this point, do we need a regular multimodal transportation board? If so, wipe the slate clean, start from scratch. What should that board be doing for the benefit of the city and its residents in its advisory capacity to the City Commission? So of course, we're not going to solve any of this tonight. We're not going to make decisions tonight. We're going to have a productive discussion broadly about the meaning of multimodal transportation planning, the purpose behind this board, and I just encourage you, as you're formulating your thoughts tonight, I encourage you not to stay fixated on the specific language of the existing ordinance, but to take a step back and really consider what is the service to the city that this board is meant to provide, and where do we actually need this board to focus its energy. Staff is really excited to move forward and get some future direction, not necessarily tonight, but at a future point to get some direction on where we need to take this. And so, of course, this is not the only discussion or the only opportunity to discuss. It's really sort of the beginning of that process. We've not drafted any ordinance language to date. And so, lastly, in conclusion, I'm just going to reiterate more pointedly the questions that we presented in your packet today, which were, number one, what mode or modes, if any, of transportation should be prioritized explicitly through the Multimodal Transportation Board ordinance, and do we need a board at this time? And then number two, how can staff assist in ensuring a smooth and productive restart of the Multimodal Transportation Board for all involved? And number three, where should the focus be in crafting the new Multimodal Transportation Board enabling ordinance to support the City Commission in its advisory capacity? What should the board do on a regular basis? So with that, I would like to turn it over to the mayor to kick off the discussion. And staff, of course, is here to assist as needed. Nick brought his binder of history. It was very helpful in informing this memo, and we look forward to a dynamic discussion between the City Commission and the members of the Multimodal Transportation Board.
Thank you. That was excellent. Really, I think we all probably learned something from that, so I really appreciate that. I do want to make one note. Rosie Cool, a member of the Multimodal Board, has resigned, and it's on the agenda to accept that resignation on Monday night, so that is why she is not here. While Leah, a lot of her focus was going backward into the past, and a lot of that's relevant, I think it's important that we focus on moving forward and what we plan to do. I know that there's a lot of frustration, and we recognize that, and I hope that we don't dwell on that and rather, again, follow Leah's recommendation in figuring out how we want to move forward. I think there are certain things that you've gotten embroiled in that we ought to just say at the outset. We kind of set some boundaries, okay? The City Commission has the power of the purse, and that's not anything that would ever be given up to any advisory board. Infrastructure, you've gotten involved in conversations about sewer and water lines and ripping up streets, and it's just, that is an area where you've met a lot of frustration, and that's what we're trying to solve here. Bring a lot of those responsibilities back to the commission and really focus, narrow and focus the role of the multimodal board. So with that, I'm going to ask the chairman of the multimodal board to summarize, if you like, whatever.
Well, I'm not going to endeavor to summarize all of our discussions. The staff has done a really great job of marshaling all the facts and historical record in the memo, and verbal communication here I think was really solid in terms of where we want to go. We met as a body, and Ms. Englund was so gracious as to take these notes that you see here. We agreed as a board to come up with, try to synthesize all of this information into some short, pithy remark where we could open this up, which is to say that the process, as it were, with the special assessment district and evaluating these projects is not effective. And so we're just trying to figure out a way to organize ourselves going forward. And so that's a summary of our discussion where we had some good dialogue, and so that's what we're here to do, to figure out how we organize ourselves going forward to reach our goals as a city and volunteers on the board.
Good, thank you. I would like to kick it off with a quick question to Nick or Leah, and that is, are multimodal transportation boards a thing? Do other communities have them? What do they look like? How do they function?
Yeah, so that is a really interesting question to consider. So as I stated, we did start doing some research on the topic. The short answer is no, they are not. Birmingham is incredibly unique in this region, in the state, potentially in the country, in having this board at all. Again, my research has been preliminary. I haven't scoured the country, but typically I could only find boards assembled for a very specific purpose or who were overseeing a transit operator. One board I did find all the way on the West Coast, a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee, which had some interesting goals and purpose and enabling language that I could see us taking sort of some notes from that. But again, that was on the West Coast in California, and I've not yet found something close to home like what we're doing here. It is pretty unique.
And a follow-up. You said that the multimodal transportation plan was developed before the board was created. I know that there are some master plans, such as the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, that must be updated every 5 years or something. Is there a requirement that we update our plan? Is there a requirement? And or does our plan need updating? And would that be something that an advisory board would be involved with?
So, to the best of my knowledge, which I think is pretty good here, there's no legal state statute that requires a city to have a multimodal transportation plan. I think it's, to answer your second question, I think it's a useful document, and the answer is yes, it very much needs updating. You had mentioned in your intro that we're pretty well through it. Is it 100%? No, but we're pretty well through it for the most part. And it's been, since the plan, more like almost 15 years. The landscape has changed a lot. So that's why you see notes in plans like the Birmingham Plan 2040 and the Birmingham Green Healthy Climate Plan that say, hey, you should probably update your multimodal transportation plan.
And the board's involvement, potential involvement, and an advisory board, would you anticipate that an advisory board would have a role in updating that plan? Given that there was no advisory board involved in the formulation of the original plan.
I think there was an advisory board, but it was put together specific to the plan. Maybe we're saying the same things, but It's similar to when we did like the 2040 master plan. We put together a specific board to go through requests for proposals and things. So it would not be unusual to formulate, say, I'm just going to make this up, a multimodal plan advisory board to help through the development of a plan like that. It would not be unusual, not for the city or just generally.
Which I just wanted to add, we did have a committee, it was an ad hoc committee. It wasn't a formal city commission or city advisory board. When, it was a steering committee is what we called it. When we were researching complete streets and how far did we want to go and what types of things did we want included in the plan, and that board helped guide the creation of the plan. One of the recommendations of the plan was to set up a permanent board. So that steering committee, some of those original members were actually placed on the first multimodal board.
Zingler.
Just to note on that, like, at least for as we're thinking of solutions going forward, there is a chief mobility officer for the state of Michigan that focuses on advanced mobility. And like in those circles, there's often a focus on universal design, which isn't what mode do we prioritize, but it's how do we design so that we don't have to prioritize a design, so that we're building for everyone. I think those are things that we work on a lot in the corporate world. So anyway, I follow more of the advanced future stuff that they're working on, but it would be something that we could look at for, you know, if there's anything to take down to the more local level.
The floor is open.
I guess I would just say, like, I think part of the question is whether or not is the board created to execute on a plan, or is it just general advocacy? So I was inspired to join the board and felt this call to action because I had a neighbor that was part of the ad hoc committee he was legally blind. He rode his bicycle around town, and I lived on a street that was perpendicular to Lincoln. He was describing to me the projects that were done on Lincoln to narrow the road, add bump outs, add pedestrian crossings, and I thought to myself, wow, this guy, he's legally blind, he's riding his bike around town. He's passed away in the past several years, but you would see him riding around town, and this gentleman was in a position to kind of shape public policy, to advocate. I had starting a family, I had young kids. We were trying to figure out, well, is there an easy form of ingress and egress into the city? And so back to my original comment that, you know, I think it goes without saying that the plan has been almost implemented at this point. It's a little bit long in the tooth, but what's the purpose of the board? Is it just general advocacy for these different modes of transportation, or was it to execute against a plan which we can agree is, you know, it's now 10 years henceforth and maybe needs some updating? So that just
Commissioner Hay.
Thank you. I'll start with just a couple of observations and then let the conversation flow a little bit further. But Leah asked one question, which was, should the board even exist? Yes, I think it should. I don't think it would be wise for us to take it away now that we've had it, especially now that we've had it for a period of time. Part of the reason for that is what I just said. Also, we have an unusually engaged community, which we've talked about this many times before with other issues. And we have boards for all sorts of different matters that have importance for our residents. So I think it should continue to exist as a board. That's not a commentary on what the scope is, but I think we need to still have it. So I'm trying to address specifically one of your questions right there. I'll wait for the rest of the conversation with the rest of this.
Commissioner Long.
As former many years chair of the Parks and Rec Board, the reason that the Parks and Rec Master Plan is updated every 5 years is not a city requirement. It is a requirement of the state of Michigan that in order to be eligible for funding from various venues, primarily the Department of Natural Resources, you have to update the plan every 5 years. But it's also, I think, excellent practice to update a plan that often, because it lets you codify your advances and improvements and plan for the future. And it's also an excellent resource document. It's a cultural document. It serves many things. And what the Parks and Rec Board does in that process is establishes a subcommittee, works closely with city staff, brings in, has an RFP for an outside consultant who has expertise. I think last time it was McKenna. It's been McKenna a few times, to help them develop the plan. But for Parks and Rec, they don't involve the whole board through the entire process. They have sub meetings, and then they bring drafts and parts back to the board and ask questions, and then go back. And then they also have public comment. They have a charrette or two where people can bring their ideas to what's your priority for future improvements in parks and so forth. So if the multimodal board was to continue to exist, fulfilling that sort of advanced trench work for the city could certainly be a focus for updating the multimodal transportation plan.
Is there anyone who disagrees with that? Okay.
No, I think, as you look at the parks plan, we're looking at more and more accessibility for all ages and abilities. And it makes no sense to have an accessible park if you can't get the road or the sidewalk to accommodate that. So there needs to be some sort of an integration of those thoughts and ideas in some sort of a forum, and not being a standalone type opportunity.
Yes, I just had a couple of things that I wanted to add, to Leah's point, when you talked about the original board. Mark and I were both here when the plan was created, when the board was created, and were part of that process at the time. And I can tell you also that at that time, there was engineering, and they designed the road, and they designed it for the cars, and how thick does the asphalt need to be, and what's the turning radius for the car. And it wasn't the complete streets picture, where they didn't look at, and this is not your predecessors, I'm just saying, that's what they were taught, that's what they were trained, that's what the practice was at the time. Move the cars, as little congestion as possible, keep them moving. It wasn't slowing the traffic, it wasn't making sure there were safe crossings everywhere, it wasn't making sure that someone in a wheelchair could get across in one light signal. It wasn't making sure that there's bike connections and sharrows and bike lanes and all of those things. So that was the impetus of the board as a whole, was one, to bring the engineering world out of the car alone and into a more comprehensive review from a planning, design, multimodal kind of perspective. So to your point, Leah, that was the main point of why we started all of this for complete streets in the first place. And you absolutely hit it on the head that we have absolutely done that. We've had 15 years of working to make sure that we have a plan to incorporate all the modes. Was it a starting point? Yes. Has it changed over the years? Yes. Should we update it? I totally think we should update it, because we have done a lot, but we're also missing some things still, particularly in some pedestrian gaps that we still have throughout the city. And as best practices change, things change. We want to update the plan. But I think the original goal was to get all of that into consideration when we designed a road, and we didn't just pick the road, boom, here's the road, move the cars as fast as we can with as little congestion as possible. So we have definitely accomplished that goal.
Hi, Pat Hilbert. On that note, in the June meeting, we discussed northbound South Eaton at Maple. So this is coming north on this road right here, Eaton, coming right to the bridge and such like. And what was presented was that in order, we could not create in the lights scenario, in the traffic lighting, we could not create a situation where pedestrians had the clear right of way, where there was no cars going through that pedestrian crosswalk. And I'm not going to try to argue that point at the moment, but I think it gets to the point of, or the purpose of a multimodal transportation board, that you need a board to advocate on a intersection by intersection basis in favor of of a truly multimodal situation. We need advocates for pedestrians to cross at pedestrian crosswalks. So even if our even if our advocacy fails eventually in front of the commission, we need to advocate for it. The pedestrians need a voice who can advocate in their favor.
Thinking, so like trying to think about the core questions that have been thrown out, like what's the role of the board? And like our chairman pointed out to, are we executing or are we advising? And I'd love to know from the commission, the bigger decisions that go through us before they come to you guys, like what's been useful? You know, and I know the big one are looking at these streets and how we evaluate designs, you know, and controversially cost as a measure of value, you know, and like what is it that we can hash out for you all before it gets to you? Because that seems like a big part of this is we understand our role. Like what's useful? You know, where do you guys need help?
Does anyone else on the commission want to take that question, or are you going to lay it on me? 'Cause I mean, I can, you know, honestly, you took a whole lot of heat that we took heat too. And one of those I wasn't involved in, but I could watch it. And that was unfortunate. You didn't need to do that. And we took heat too. So it wasn't like you took any heat. There was a lot of heat. Everybody took it. So, and honestly, I mean, there were standards, and you were recommending the standards. So, like, what I would be looking for, I got to look at the future. What I'd be looking for is that exactly what Mr. Hilbert said, was advocacy. Where do we have the holes? How do we make the plan better? How do we improve the city? These road projects, they're a whole nother thing. Somebody had their hand up. Commissioner Haig.
I'm kind of on the same page as you. So when it comes to road project, and I'll try and break it into pieces. When it comes to road projects, the heat that was talked about is there was a need for subterranean infrastructure improvements. The way I look at it is that is a statement of fact that you would literally just say, there was a decision made. It's not within the multimodal board's hands, purview, to even really have a conversation about it. There was a decision made for these statistically significant reasons. End of that part of the conversation. If anybody wants to bring up more details, come to the City Commission about it or go through stuff. But the multimodal board, it's a one-sentence answer. And then it has to move on. So you do not have that particular problem. You should not have that particular problem ever come to you. Done. So kind of where Mayor Ballard's talking about that shouldn't be part of it. Now, when it comes to also weightings and useful information, just by, I would say, the environment of how everything's constructed, and the city manager's given us some background behind that. The environmental conditions that have prevailed that are now changing, the majority of the work that comes from you will be road-going vehicle-based. I don't want to just say cars, but road-going vehicle-based. The bits that are really, really useful are exactly how do we blend them. Now, could we put a weighting on anything? I think that was one of the questions, Leah, that you kind of led towards us. Do you want to are we to try and give a weighting of interest or not? I don't think we can or should do that. It's going to sort of weigh itself out as far as the projects that come up, and then how do they integrate all modes together? Mr. Hooker talked about that with, great, we've got a park, but you can't get to it. That's not really useful for a park. That's one reason why I say multi-modal board has to remain. So, can I give you a hard example of what's useful? It's actually kind of difficult to give that given the historical part of it. And this is coming from someone that was on the multi-modal board before I came on the City Commission. It's hard to say, yes, that one piece of data was super useful. To me, it is enabling the board to go through the details and then try and give us the summary version of whatever the project may be. Because if it was important enough to come to a board, it's important enough to be considered. So I can't necessarily say, well, this is better than that. I have to treat it all equally.
So then I think to maybe rephrase the question is, what are the big decisions that we see our city needing to look at, the big decisions that you as commissioners will have to evaluate? And then of those, what are things we can help with? Because if you're trying to be real practical about it, because I'm like, you know, so like, should we, for example, are we going to continue to look at the design of the streets as we rebuild these capital projects? You know, if that's one, we should certainly workshop how we can be helpful and what frameworks we should use to put those designs forward. If you guys are saying, if I'm reading between the lines, if we're completely taking those away from the Multi-Modal Transit Board, then what else is going to come through? Like, what kinds of decisions?
Well, my view on that might be that the engineer would design, and the traffic consultants would design the street, and they would design it to standards, and hopefully it would be multimodal in nature, and you might look at it and say, yeah, this is good, or suggest some changes to it, rather than the project going to you at the outset and then having it come back to us. I'll make one more thing, just to get in people's minds. We don't have to discuss it right now. As a resident, and what I hear in the community, they have concerns about speeding. You hear it all the time. Cut through traffic, and in some places, heavy trucks.
And sidewalks.
And sidewalks, what about sidewalks?
Just
lack of
Having a safe
Have-
place to walk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Having a sidewalk, not having a sidewalk.
Right. Those are things we hear about. Crosswalks, why is there a crosswalk here and there's not a crosswalk there? Seems like the same condition. Now, I don't know whether those are things that the multimodal board needs to say, well, you know, in the context of some budget or some programming, you know, these are things that we would suggest get done. They would seem to assist in multimodal transportation. You have more to say, Commissioner.
I've maybe slightly reversed the order there. I wouldn't want to have expenditure put into place for engineering design before it goes into the multimodal, because yes, we have standards, yes, we have to start with standards, but I think we also have to look carefully at where standards need to be deviated from, because it is not a one-size-all answer that fits everything. Doesn't matter how hard you try pushing that square peg, it does not go into the round hole. It just will not happen, and it will not end well, and we've seen that before. So I think there needs to be a high-level proposal, maybe involving consultancy, but it should not go to a very deep level. It should start with the standards, and then the multimodal board. Your notes have got similar comments on your notes that I can see next to mine. The multimodal board needs to be able to address cost impact, because project costs have become disproportionate to inflation by a rather significant margin. And so what was effectively noise 15 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, to someone's budget is now soul destroying to others today. And so my personal feeling is, yes, start with the standards, but look at the entire environment of the action to be taken, and that does involve understanding costs. It doesn't mean that as a board you will be making a decision on costs. The mayor said that is the city commission, and it will be the city commission. That's the end of that. But you need to understand the scope of the impact to everybody. Because for some, like on Wimbledon, also on Arlington Shirley, we've heard people where initial cost estimates were coming back in some cases of $70,000–$80,000. When I bought my house in 2009, it cost me $110,000. I'm sorry, but there's no value add for me to add those kinds of numbers. There's no value add for anybody, because there is no realtor that will be able to sell a house and tell you that, yeah, you spent $50,000 on a road, your house price went up by $50,000. It doesn't happen that way. So we are talking about life-changing numbers for families, for retirees. That's why we start with the standard, but you have to look at the entire environment of what's going on around it. And I think that's very important, because that's when we get into the what, where, why, and the reasons for a deviation and does it make sense? And sometimes it will and sometimes it will not.
So, I want to understand what you're saying. I want to make sure I understand, because are you suggesting that the multimodal board should be involved in road improvement projects and involved in the consideration of the cost thereof?
Yes, because it is part of the impact of what that road improvement or road change project will actually be. If we chose to be blind to that, then the example I give, if we choose to be blind to that, everything would follow the standard, and we would look like a rubber stamp on a piece of paper, because everything would be exactly the same. There'd be no character. There'd be excessive uniformity. And would it meet the purpose of an enjoyable place to live? That's why I talk about the environmental, and it's not necessarily the green space. I mean the living environment, the humanity environment.
I don't disagree with some of what you say, but I think there are probably people here would disagree that it would be the role of the multimodal board to make those considerations. Would anyone here like to specifically address Commissioner Haig's?
Yeah, if I can have a go,
You did
please.
have
Yeah.
it,
So we talk about cost, yeah, and cost is like money. And when it comes to doing these projects, if we have a complete street, costs like whatever it costs, $1 million, say, pick a number to be arbitrary. But if we do Cape Seal, it's not free. It costs 3/4 of that, all of it costs, yeah, because the hole's this deep, you've got to put something there, and you've got to put Cape Seal on top. So what happens is that if it was your road or my road, it'd be $1 million for that, say, and $700,000 to do Cape Seal. And you probably say, well, because of life and support and how long it lasts, you do complete your concrete road every single time, yeah. So what it is, though, is when you do a new complete street, it goes to the residents locally on that street. The rest of the money, though, if it doesn't get upgraded, like Wimbledon now, it goes to all the other residents. It may not be as much money, it's not life-changing, but it does. So when I look at my taxes are X amount, and your budget you get from all the taxes is X amount, and divide by one by the other, times it by 100,000, it works out that basically for Wimbledon not to become a new street, cost me like $30. You can't think, okay, well, $30 not going to kill me. No, it's not. But take Wimbledon and all the way up, all the way around the area, all the way up through Tottenham and all that sort of stuff, 10 times that. So really it's going to cost me $300 not to upgrade the roads. And yet what do I get out of it? I get a city with broken roads, with speeds we can't control, and not very good for cyclists, you know. And yet the roads parallel to that area, like Mohegan I think it is a complete street, and it's lovely to cycle down, you know. So what's the advantage for all the other residents? I get the people there have this problem, you know.
I want to interrupt you for a second, because I do want to focus on what we believe the Multi-Modal Transportation Board's role is. We can talk all day about the frustrations of funding, of how it ought to be funded, of how it ought to be designed, all that stuff. What we need to focus on tonight is what is the Multi-Modal Transportation Board's role going forward.
Right. So
and I would submit that getting involved in some of that stuff is...
Totally agree. We should not be involved. It's
okay,
like,
so
you know,
that's what
we've got a plan. We know how to do it. We should be executing it. Period. Yeah, that's what I believe. Yeah, and the idea that we're protecting a handful of residents and everyone else has to pay just seems ridiculous to me. But that's my personal view. Yeah, but that's where I'm going. So then, but then it comes to a bigger question. It's like what? It's been interesting tonight because I've never really considered what the role of the board was and why it's even there. You know, and we've got some smart guys on the board now. I think they're great to work with. So, yeah, don't get me wrong. I think when it comes to working out, you know, what stop sign is going to be and what shape it is and all that, we put a lot of work into it and we do it really, really well. Don't dispute that, yeah. But if we didn't exist and we just took the recommendations every time from the consultants, what would really have gone wrong in the city? Probably not a whole heap. It won't be quite as good. Don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't. The whole place wouldn't fall down, you know what I mean? Because we take the recommendations from the consultants and really kind of fine tune it and it comes out really good, yeah? But the initial recommendations they come up with aren't horrible. They're not coming out with something which is like so ridiculous that we need to reconsider it. I don't think there's many. I can't think of too many examples where we've torn up what they've come up with. Have we finessed it? Absolutely.
So when it comes to the question of I want to understand what you're saying when it comes to what you believe the multimodal board ought to be doing going forward.
Yeah. So I think as it works for 99% of the subject matter we do, we have a suggestion from the consultants to do something, the stop sign here or what. They present all the data with the police reports and all the other good stuff, and it saves you going through all that stuff just to come up with a conclusion, we're going to put a stop sign on Lincoln or whatever, And you don't need to listen to that 2-hour conversation. We don't mind taking that on and coming up with that solution. And that's why I think it's okay, If we didn't exist, it probably wouldn't be horrible, but we don't mind doing it, But anything beyond, as soon as it gets into how the money of the is going to be spent, that's outside, and I think all this would have been fixed if the very first time Complete Streets came up, we just pushed back and said, is it going to be redone or not? Tell us what the surface is, we're going to redesign it. We're really good at doing, whether it's a completely brand new road or an existing road or whatever, we can make the best of it, which you get, but we can't be part of that decision to get to that point.
On the flip side,
Commissioner Host.
Well, I think we brought up two issues, and for weeks I've been thinking, who other than the multimodal board can deal with the road surface? And I can't think of any other board. And we have saddled you with the public, and the real problem is in your notes here that you don't have the costs. Now, if we had a restaurant menu of all the different variations of the road, that would simplify your discussion to more of the sidewalks, the bikes, etc. So I'd love somebody to refute that. But the other problem is what we've just been talking about, is speed remediation. Julie and the police, they're wonderful, but they have such a hard line on what can happen and what can't happen statistically. I would much prefer recommendations that would be, let's try this, and if it doesn't work, we'll take out that stop sign or the speed hump or whatever. But I sense some frustration watching you guys having to deal with all these specifications. I would prefer that you dealt with it as resident-friendly decision making.
Mr. Hawk.
I guess I would say that we're not necessarily saddled by the homeowners. I think it's the cost implications that they gravitate towards the interest in. I mean, especially the significance of the costs that they're looking at. And separating that from these decisions is kind of a nice thing. It's a panacea. But for us to make the right decision, we have to have some of the cost implications of these decisions. We had this with the redesign of South Eaton that is just going to come through. We had complete cost estimates as far as doing this or versus this and versus that. And I think we need to have those sort of things in order to make the right judgment call for the community. Now,
if you were to continue operating in the way we have been, in other words, if we're going to bring you South Eaton and tell you or ask you to redesign it, then you think we need to allow you to consider costs. That's what I hear you saying, right? Should we even bring you South Eaton? Is that something up, in other words, the whole design? Or should we bring you a design and say, how does this work from a multimodal standpoint?
If you want us to integrate vehicular traffic, bike traffic, pedestrian traffic, absolutely.
But what I'm
If that's our
suggesting
job.
is that she would do it, the city engineer would engineer a road that had all that stuff, and then bring it to you and say, does this meet, does this accomplish our goals? Because you had so much to do with writing the new multimodal master plan. You wouldn't be grappling with the whole design process and the costs. You'd just be like, does this work?
I would
according to the
submit that that's exactly the way it occurred for Eaton, South Eaton. I mean, we had the engineering folks come through, did a design, we looked at it, we said, oh, we need to look at this. You know, we need, we always see a bicycle issue here, let's look at this. And let's also consider the commercial businesses that are along there. Can we accommodate parking and still have line of sight so that people are protected getting out of vehicles and people are protected with there's oncoming bicycle traffic at the same time. So I think there's a sensitivity that the board has, that you're, no disrespect, that the design engineers, et cetera, might not necessarily get out of the whole assignment, put it that way.
And this is a city project. There's no special assessments involved.
Correct.
Any consideration of costs, and were there considerations of costs?
Yes.
Were strictly city costs, right?
Yeah, city costs as it relates to the construction of it, the maintenance of it, because you still have to have snow removal and things of that sort. So we look at all those aspects of it. Yeah.
Commissioner Long.
Mr. Hilbert.
No, Commissioner Long had her.
Oh, Matt Long, I'm sorry. My apologies.
She's been waiting. Really good.
I think it's more appropriately handled the way we're talking about, that the staff and the consultant come up with the design, and then it goes to the Multi-Modal Transportation Board to evaluate whether they have suggestions about whether it meets our pedestrian goals, whether there are suggestions they can make for tweaking, line of sight, whatever. In the same way that we do not ask the Parks and Rec Board to design the parks. They don't start with a clean sheet of paper. They don't say we want these features. They don't design the park. The consultants design the park with staff input, and then they bring park designs to the Parks and Rec Board and to the public and say, what do you think? Did we miss anything? What else would you like to see here? And that's obviously much less restrictive environment than street design, but that's to say that we do not ask them to do the initial decision-making or the siting or the drainage or any of those things. It is this consultant and the staff brings to the Parks and Rec Board, we have the decision that we're redoing Pembroke Park. We've got a survey about what the community would like to see there that informs what the consultants and staff look at.
In many ways, much more complicated than a street.
And then they bring the product to the Parks and Rec Board for comment, for evaluation, for refinement, and the Parks and Rec Board is also the venue where the public can come and make remarks. And I think that is a more appropriate model for Multi-Modal Transportation Board going forward than being involved in costs about, street design. I don't think it belongs going to them first.
I think we're both saying the same thing. I mean, the way South Eaton was constructed, or was developed, is the consultants actually put the design together and then ran it through us. But where the cost comes in is where we wanted to suggest some different changes. We wanted to know what the cost implications of that work, of that was, in conjunction with what would be the benefit.
And that, that's fine. It becomes incredibly fraught when there are special assessments involved. I mean, you almost have to say we gotta handle that a different way.
Yeah,
Say
and
that.
that's what I was just gonna say. You know, Commissioner Long, the way you just spelled it out, I think would work out very well. And to your point, Mr. Hocker, you're kind of saying the same thing. The cost issues are where we get in the weeds, because it's the commission's decision to say, okay, I have $5 million this year to put towards bike and pedestrian upgrades and amenities, right? It's their decision, how much out of the budget can we afford, and then you go through and review it. Where the problem comes in is where it's on the resident, right? And the funding for the project as a whole, and it isn't coming out of the city budget, it's coming out of someone's personal pocket. So but that is, to me, a policy decision for the city commission as to how you want to fund these projects overall. And once the commission decides it's a special assessment, or it's this, or it's this, or it's this, there are a couple of different options. None of them are good, because all road stuff is expensive, but how do you want to do it? To me, that's a policy discussion for the commission. And then once the budget is refined, if for a particular project, then it comes to the multimodal board. Similar to a park. For instance, the commission decides what they want to put on the ballot. Do we want to do a $20 million parks bond? Okay, we'll put it on the ballot. If the residents support it, then you know you have your budget, and you try to fit as much as you can in that budget. To your point, you still want to know is the value add worth it on the smaller scale?
Well, and likewise, is the commission going to get into the weeds of whether we're going to put armadillos in, or collapsible poles, or we're going to raise or lower the grade to define those paths and so on? And that's where I think multimodal would come in to define why we are suggesting this. The cost implication is negligible. We recommend doing this.
If I can add real quick, something that I see repeatedly is that we are conflating budget with value. And they're two very different things. Budget, so spending funds, where the funds come from, sending out to bid for a project, getting bids from construction companies. Very clear that is not the multimodal board's role. We shouldn't be playing in that. What we have been trying to do is and we argue, I think there's different opinions on this, but I do think there's several of us that believe we should be evaluating the value that something brings, because we are limited in resources. And again, that's independent from the source of the funds. So again, source of funds, let's put aside, that's not our job. There's still going to be limited resources. And if you're going to tell me that something is 5 times the cost because it's in a different material, then that's going to make me rethink the design decisions. And so, did everybody here see the Wimbledon one work? Was everyone involved in that one? We put together a framework. We had several months of our meetings where we went back and forth with staff. And so we got to a pretty decent framework where we had many dimensions where we were able to evaluate the designs. And when we talked about cost there, again, it was just a general directional measure of value. It was not budget, it was not bids. So I believe strongly that if you're going to have a multimodal board in any capacity evaluating things and making recommendations, we have to be allowed and encouraged to consider value. And that's one where I think we've been getting different direction from staff and administration on what we can and cannot do.
Did you want to go?
Yeah.
Mr. Hilberg had been waiting. So.
Going back a little bit in our conversation, the text that our board gave to the commission regarding Arlington and Shirley was exactly the text that was presented by the administration, and then drama ensued. So I think we're kind of trying to get around the point that this cost factor and who pays for the issue is an underlying issue that we cannot overcome that issue.
Right, and what I think we're
address
trying to
that
do is
issue.
get that out of your heads.
Okay.
So that is not
I
something
mean,
you need to
Mr.
go
Davies' point was to first go to the commission to decide whether or not it would be, as many of you know, I teach this issue as part of my graduate engineering management course, specifically looking at Poppleton. And we refer to improved and unimproved streets. In my work, I call it Tier 1 and Tier 2 streets. Because at some point, both Wimbledon and Byrd this year had exactly the same condition. It's just that Byrd gets repaved for free to the homeowners, and Wimbledon for the same work is going to pay $200, $300 a foot. So we can't get I lost my train of thought. Oh, we have Tier 1 and Tier 2 streets. If the commission can make the decision as to whether or not what's the next one, Abbey or something? If the commission decides this will be a Tier 2 street before it comes to the multimodal board, then we can simply address that. I'll add one other thing on top of that, though, however. Wimbledon and Pierce are both major roads. Wimbledon is currently funded only for Cape Seal, and we cannot put speed mitigation in on a Cape Seal street. Pierce, which...
Okay,
what?
I'm going to interrupt you.
Sure.
Because we need to focus on the role of the Multi-Modal Transportation Board. So what is your point?
If we're going to advocate for safety, we need to advocate that Wimbledon be as safe as Pierce. And Wimbledon cannot be as safe as Pierce as long as we have the current funding structure.
Excellent. Good point.
Yes.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kozlowski.
Yeah, so I was going to say that I piggybacking on the idea of value, I do think there is sort of an obvious place. You know, somebody has an unmarked crosswalk. There's no stop sign or anything, and we want to put something there. We can put like a stop sign there. We can put a pedestrian crossing thing. They've got those pedestrian crossings where you push a button and it lights up, and then they've got like the big like hawk signals where you push a button and these red lights start flashing, right? And the question is, well, which one of these do we do? You know, if the multimodal's job is, well, just pick the maximally safe thing every single time, they're going to be like, hawk signals everywhere, baby, and they're crazy expensive, and the city commission's just going to say, like, well, we're just not going to do this because we don't have the money to do it. So I feel like it makes sense for them to consider the value in terms of, okay, we're going to look at this intersection, how many people are crossing here, how wide is the street to begin with, is, you know, is just a pedestrian crossing sign good enough? Is a stop sign good enough? But I'm not sure. I think what Mr. Hilberg said, I think, is absolutely true, that if the commission could provide some broad guidance on the $1 million, or $2 million, $10 million questions of like, well, what kind of road is this going to be? Then it would give multimodal the opportunity to say, okay, we know that we're dealing with an improved street, and now we know what kind of tools we can take out of our toolkit to make this street as safe as possible. But if it's still in flux when it comes to them what the road surface is even going to be, it kind of makes their job impossible. And I think for when the items get to be that big a ticket, it's not clear to me that the multimodal board should have the responsibility of trying to figure out what is the right, and like residents are coming and some residents are saying improve it, and some of them are saying, no, don't improve it. You know, I'm not sure that it's fair to put that on the multimodal board to make the judgment call about what is the right cost-benefit ratio there. I feel like we are the elected body. We should be the ones to try to feel out what is best for the residents now, what is best for the entire city long term.
Question. When to his specific example of crosswalks and stuff you can put in at the crosswalk, do our consultants consider value when they recommend whether it should be a flashing, what did you call it?
A hawk signal?
Hawk signal.
I think it was.
Yes, I think it's fair to say they do.
Okay.
Because that's to your point, Commissioner Kozlowski. You know, if you're talking about an intersection and a crosswalk where the pedestrian counts are 2 people a day, or 200 a day, or 2,000 a day, that's going to make a bigger difference as to whether you need a safer standard. You also want to look at
how
the speed
wide and
of
how
the
fast
traffic.
is the street? Yeah.
How fast is the traffic going? How wide is the crossing? All of those things they do weigh into consideration, and they put all of that in effect, and then they come up with a recommendation. And from a cost perspective, it's easier to say, well, a stop sign will cost you $200. A flashing sign will cost you $600, and a hawk sign will cost you $6,000.
So those consideration, the value is considered, when it, presumably,
Value.
when it comes to. the
Is it worth
multimodal
putting it in based on the conditions at this location? Yes.
Just to make sure everybody's aware, though, the thing that I've learned on the board the last year from the consultants is that if you don't improve a street and you leave it as Cape Seal, we do not have all the options of speed mitigation available to us. And so that's where this becomes a bit of a like thorny chicken and egg situation of you commissioners figuring out the source of funding and how much funds we can put towards something and determining the type of material on the street so that we can then go and problem solve. So there's definitely, like, if you're just playing through, okay, what are all the options that we can make this available and accessible and safe and all the things for all the modes, you know, you almost want to problem solve with both materials if you haven't sussed out the cost situation. It's, yeah.
Commissioner Haig.
Piggybacking on what she said. So, like I mentioned, when I bought my house, I got hit with a road assessment probably 3 months after I moved in. And, you know, new resident of Birmingham, everything. I literally looked and went, what's that? I have a road. I don't care. It's a road. I wasn't told I'm going to pay for my street. I'd have bought one several streets away otherwise. To what she's talking about the value. All right, so I paid it. It's fine. I paid it a couple of times. We also have to be very careful about in 25% of our roads, unimproved streets, 25%. That's where the real crux of this problem is going to really happen. I think when it comes to an improved street, the standard's there, the street's built, it's just going to be when it gets replaced or there are upgrades to safety or infrastructure around, infrastructure, wrong word, to mobility facilitation around it, so bike lanes, etc. That's definitely multimodal, no question, fine. That's an upgrade, it's city budget, fine. What we're going to look at is really the crux of the pain that happens with this board, the pain that happens with the commission is when it's an unimproved or improved discussion. The value side of things, they do need to look at, because if you come to me and say, Andrew, you've got an unimproved street right now, we're going to change it to an improved street. But what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade all these other features and you've got to pay for the upgrades. Why? Why do I have to pay for upgraded features? It's bad enough that I pay for a street, and now you want to put all these other features on top of it. Why is that my burden? So the value aspect is actually quite important. I think this is sort of where you're trying to go, is to understand what the, and I mentioned it as the entire environment. What is that environmental condition? Because I will be quite offended if someone says, well, there's the street, we're going to put bump outs here, and then we're going to put trees over there, and we're going to put extra sidewalks over here, and we want to do this, we want to do. No, not my problem. Because if that was an improved street, it would not be my problem to make that upgrade. And so the value proposition to every homeowner that comes to the multimodal board when there is a change is important for them to understand the scope of it. They don't make a decision on it, but they need to understand the scope. And then it comes to us to make those decisions on where those costs actually fundamentally lie. But part of the information process needs to be there to help with the design. And it really is truly, mostly the pain part of it is going to come down to that 25% of the roads. The other part, to Gordon, your point, it's probably finessing certain things that are set out by probably NACTO standards or something else, which, from where you and I come from, they are really primitive and backward standards as is.
So, I think what I hear you saying is that the multimodal board should continue to see these unimproved to improved road projects and help design them and listen to the public and deal with the concerns about cost before it ever comes to the commission. And now, in essence, no change whatsoever to the scope of what they do right now. And I think what we're trying to do tonight is to narrow the scope, to take that off their plate. That isn't to say they're not capable of people
They
of
need to
making
have
those
as part of
decisions.
the options matrix that was mentioned.
But we have to streamline that process.
I'll tell you how you can streamline. Give us all the information. So what's happening is we're coming into these meetings, we're being told, here is a recommendation for a street that meets all these standards. go ahead and tell us what the width should be.
Well,
And that
and
doesn't
that's
work.
wrong. That,
Correct.
Of course.
Correct.
Because we
So-
already have a standard for the.
If
Yeah.
you were to go back to like the Wimbledon phase 1, we built out a framework. If we got that, at least I would argue for more, but if we got that level of information the first time the issue came forward, along with like the staff's recommendation, they already put together a recommendation of what the street should look like. So if we got that recommendation plus the information in that framework, we could much more quickly problem solve and turn something up, and that would streamline the conversations a lot.
Yes.
A point of clarification, if I may. The questions about street width going to the multimodal board and us suggesting that it's the decision that they are to make is not necessarily wrong. That's what's in the street width policy. It says questions about street width and deviating from the 26-foot standard shall be reviewed by the multimodal board. That's why we do that, and that's why we say that. Now, whether or not it's what we want to do, I think is a better question. But as a point of clarification, it's not wrong. Not that you're saying it the way I'm saying it, but just for
also,
the
wouldn't
public.
you say that the street width standard is pretty clear that it should be 26 feet? And the only time you consider deviating is if this condition, this condition, this condition, or this condition. And we don't always necessarily stick with that, which is laid out. What allows you to deviate?
Yeah, there are specific standards laid out for when you would consider deviation.
Mr. Hucker.
I think somebody mentioned this matrix as far as, look, Laura. And I think it's important not just for a tool for ourselves, but we need to have full disclosure to the homeowners. Because I would say that a lot of people that pushed for Cape Seal did not know that speed control could not easily be integrated into that. And they may have made a different judgment. So I think we need to be clear to everybody and do a better job of informing the homeowners so that we have an informed group that comes to us that are inflamed.
Informed and inflamed instead
Exactly,
of uninformed
exactly.
and inflamed.
Exactly.
Mr. Davies.
It'd be interesting though if we had someone from Wimbledon here and someone from Shirley here talking to each other. One of them gets improved, one of them doesn't get improved, purely because of the makeup of the modal board and the commission.
Well, I'm not sure it was the makeup, but it was.
Well, all right,
the
the votes of
decision.
the votes of both boards ended up being to that conclusion. Yeah.
Well, a lot had to do with the input, I would say, observing both, a lot had to do with the input of the residents.
Well, I think but
And I think
in
that.
some ways, though, the Shirley residents were just at least as vocal, if I remember correctly, and they came back with some better arguments in many ways as well. That's what I think.
Okay.
Both of those, definitely, you're right, both of those did have a lot of resident input. And I'm not going to speculate as to the whys of motivations behind individual inputs, because that would be inappropriate. But I think it is fair to say that we received support for the majority of the residents in each one of those locations for the solutions that were proposed. And they were different solutions that had different fundamental drivers for those that wanted to get them. So the need to get resident input is there, and we need to be conscious of there are motivators that are different. Yeah, there are standards. Again, I don't necessarily, coming from an industry that has lots of standards, but I don't necessarily feel as though standards must be blindly adhered to. There needs to be leeway to address the circumstances. And that's where I support the idea of understanding cost. You don't make the decision, but your decision matrix. So I just put together a make versus buy at work for something where you just, it's a series of questions, weightings. We could do something very, very similar for us, for the community, for whatever it may be, and just say, here are the weightings that the city sees, that the multimodal board sees for the different options. There's the answer. The cost will be A, B, or C. This is how it's ranked. Do you agree with this as a community when that's an impact? And I truly think this is the one that it's just going to be the unimproved. The thorn in all of this is really the improved, unimproved discussion. The others, I don't think there is any thorn in there at all that's really insurmountable. This is the one that is the difficult point. And so I like your idea of a matrix. I've used something very similar before to try and make decisions. It is very helpful and illustrative. It informs and allows people to be enraged or not enraged, and it gives individuals in those circumstances at that particular project the ability to choose based upon their individual circumstances, which were different in different projects. Now, does that mean we always have a standard answer? No, we do not. But then it comes to us to make the final decision as to whether we want to try pushing more for a standardized future solution, or if we understand the circumstances driving the request for something other than that. We make the decision as a city commission, but I feel allowing the multimodal board to be much more informed and use tools to share that information with those that are affected is really where the multimodal board has the most impact. Yeah, I just gave you your most impactful answer. You asked me a while ago and I couldn't answer it. Now I just did.
So repeat that, please.
The multimodal board being informed in as many aspects as possible, which includes not to the dollar type cost, orders of magnitude cost implications, to be able to create something like the matrix you talked about, or make versus buy. To share that with the community of option A, B, and C, these are the consequences, this is the plus, this is the minus, this is what you get, this is what you don't get, etc. That's where they bring an enormous amount of value to us to really give us like the Cliff Notes summary.
So, Assistant City Manager.
I guess you made the comment earlier about unimproved road, you can do A, B, C, D, and E, but if you go to an unimproved road, I heard, well, yeah, that takes away maybe C, D, and E. My point is, it should not be up to the multimodal board what kind of road surfaces that road becomes. That's a city
No, that's the
commission.
matrix.
Hang on 1 sec. I listened to you. My point being is, once the decision is made as to what type of road surface is, then I think the multimodal board, whatever the city commission gives them as this is what it's going to be, then you utilize your tools and then you come back and say, this is what we're gonna do on it. It doesn't do, you look at this sheet of paper and this is all about money. This is all about, like you say, unimproved roads. This is about, I don't wanna pay for this, I wanna pay for that. I get that. So let the commission decide how they're gonna do that. And then let the multimodal board, whatever they're given, whatever the commission decides as a whole as to what that road should be, then they can put their best skills to work to make it as safe as possible, given what was decided by the city commission and the residents of that community. I don't think there's anyone in this room would say that you couldn't get the best, any street that's improved is gonna be safer than a non-improved road. Is that a safe statement? And you have control over curbs, bump outs, water retention, you have, there's a significant difference. So my point being is, in the perfect world, they'd all be improved roads, maybe different sizes or whatever, that's fine. But my point being is, and you're absolutely right, it's the unimproved road is the problem, but that's not this board, that's the multimodal board decision. That's a commission decision. And it's unfair to make them listen to residents and be beat up about costs and those things when they have no control over that. I think it'd be much better for them to be given what the road surface is gonna be and then let you guys do your magic and do what you think is best to make it safe for everybody. That's just an opinion.
That's,
You know what you could do then, because you're not saying anything that conflicts either. I think there's like an order of operations question, and in there everyone's been mentioning transparency. So like this matrix, like again, like I said, we did an okay job during the Wimbledon one, but I think you could very easily put that together as a city and post it on the website and make it very clear if you have unimproved versus improved and all the things that are available. Then you guys go make your improved versus unimproved decision, then bring it to us. Like, it doesn't matter to me whether we look at more options. You know, again, order of operations,
Sure.
I don't think it
I
matters.
think that's
You
an
just
excellent
need to be
point.
transparent to the
Yep.
residents, and that was the thing that I learned through this process is it's complicated and you don't understand it all until it's all laid out.
And the same thing with setting road widths as
Yes.
well. Needs to be completely transparent to the homeowners. You know, and to go as much detail, if these are the things that get you out of jail on going with the standard road width, but if you go narrower, then you have parking implications. And those need to be, you know, to wade with your other neighbors who won't have parking in front of their place. So the more we get out there on a website, I agree, the better, so that people can, you know, get up to speed on what we're dealing with.
Commissioner Kozlowski.
I had a question. I apologize. I haven't looked at the matrix, but my understanding is part of the sort of consternation about Wimbledon was that a price estimate was made based off of costs from the Arlington Shirley project, only for us to discover further down the road that those were not going to be the costs that the residents were going to be exposed to. They were going to be exposed to almost double the cost, just because some combination of it was a smaller project, et cetera, I don't really know. But the fact is, I'm not exactly sure we can offer such a matrix and say, here's, if you pay X, you'll get Y. I'm not sure that we know before sending out the
I think she's talking about
RFP.
a cost matrix. You're talking about I understood it as
I thought it was like a decision-making
an option
matrix.
of value, not an actual. It doesn't put a hard number on it. It's
Like a
order of
design, like a
magnitude.
safety design. maybe.
Sure.
Signs, $3 signs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's orders of magnitude only. You can't get precise with this that early. It's just you can
Okay.
get this for this much. You can get this for this much type thing.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
that's the
So
matrix.
very broad strokes.
We don't weigh, we're not allowed to weigh in, nor should we, when you're actually looking at the engineering estimates and the construction bids. That's
Yeah.
what you guys do, yeah.
Yeah, well, and just, we don't know it ahead of time, is I think part of the problem is we have to do kind of the street design, we have to put out to bid something specific, reasonably specific. And at that point, we get back, and, you know, I know that we're talking, the matrix is maybe talking orders of magnitude, but I'm saying double or triple is very meaningful for residents, right? They might be willing to pay, you know, $3,000 for something, but $9,000 is a lot, or $10,000 is okay, but 30 is not, right? And so even knowing the orders of magnitude might not be, I mean, I think it's probably still worth doing, and, you know, I'm always in favor of more information, being more transparent about decision-making processes. But I guess I'm worried that this might not actually mitigate some of these cost problems that we're having.
Okay, we gotta bring this back to the role of the multimodal board. And I think that we're really trying to extricate you from the whole question of improved, unimproved, and costs and residents. That has got to go from, in my opinion, and I think I'll have support on the commission for that this is not something because this is what happens. This is going on between us. Now bring in residents. Okay? So how about a thought experiment? There's no special assessments ever. City pays everything. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
Someday it will.
But in such an environment, what then would be the multimodal board's role? Okay? Because we have to, at least right now, pull that out of it. We can't keep going back and forth about that. Okay? So let's get back to what Leah was talking about at the beginning, and she was very inspiring to me, talking about the history and what we need to do. We can't sit here and discuss special assessments only. So, again, she asked, if I think you said, if we were going to start from scratch. And I'd like to hear some response to that question. If we were going to start from scratch, clear the slate clean, welcome the dog in, and then decide what a new multimodal, let's call it something else. What do we want to call it? Just come up with a name. anything. Transportation Board.
Sure. Oh.
What would it be? What would it be?
I would advocate for that, and I'd point to Byrd this past year versus Wimbledon this past year. Byrd never came to us. There was nothing to discuss on Byrd. So if we go to a point where there,
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
Why is that? Why did Byrd never go to them, but?
So Byrd didn't come to them in the beginning of the year in July timeframe. There was just, you already had existing pedestrian features on there for the crosswalks for the schools crossing, and then no recommendation of changing the width of Byrd. So it was essentially Byrd went back as existing conditions.
It was a
because you had the
reconstruction.
pedestrian improvements already there for the crosswalks at the schools and signage for the schools itself.
So we go to.
And I think one other thing, there was also nothing in the multimodal plan that identified a key change for that particular street or zone.
Correct.
Well, technically, you could say the same occurred on Wimbledon. There's been no change, right? Are you really changing anything? You're digging it up, putting it in there, and putting the Cape Seal back.
I'm sorry, I think we
was
missed
the
an
consequence
important
of the
point
discussion,
that
but-
Byrd is not being charged for their road reconstruction.
Because they're an improved road. But we're not talking about that right now.
But
remember?
your premise was, let's assume the city was going to pay for
Right.
all improvement, and I would advocate in favor of that.
Okay. But that's not what I asked. I asked, what should the role of the multimodal board be
The board would be
in a
much
world where special assessments didn't exist?
Our job is easy.
But what is it?
Well,
We still deal with things like pedestrian safety at Eaton and Maple. We would still deal with, should there be a bump out in this case? I mean, do we really need to slow traffic and that sort of thing? But our hands are tied. We can't slow traffic on Wimbledon because it's not an improved road.
If you're starting over, we could also just proactively go around the city and identify problem issues. Like, it sounds like there's already questions coming in. We could run a survey. Speaking of the chief mobility officer for Michigan, there's a ton of advanced mobility stuff, so we can look at what's coming in the next 5 to 10, 15 years. Are we going to be doing urban air mobility? Do we need vertiports downtown Birmingham? Like, we could start looking at some real advanced stuff and bringing that in, and then seeing, okay, we're putting in a new parking structure downtown Birmingham. We're building this beautiful restoration hardware. Should there be capability of a vertiport on top of that? There probably should.
Of a what?
A vertiport? Right. So, happy to get into advanced mobility when that becomes part of the
Just
agenda.
define vertiport.
Oh, it's for, think about helicopter landing.
Oh.
There's more, like with the next.
and stuff.
Small
For
personal
drones
units.
and things like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
The Jetsons.
That's already,
Really? Okay.
yeah, there's a ton of pilots
Okay.
happening around,
Okay.
and Michigan's
Okay.
very at the
Well, if
center of
there's gonna
it.
be one, I can guarantee you that somebody's gonna want it here.
Yeah.
Commissioner Long.
I'm wondering if there's any role of the multimodal, if we call it, or maybe the complete mobility board or something, interacting or organizing or assisting with dealing with like MDOT in the state for like the road diet, for looking at how the pedestrians are affected by Woodward, because that doesn't really live anywhere right now. I mean, we've killed ourselves to submit our road diet. We've, I think individually all participated in the charrettes that MDOT had at the Baldwin Library. We've encouraged residents to submit comments. But that effort, which is of great interest to many, many residents, doesn't have a board looking at it, doesn't have, you know, it doesn't live anywhere, it doesn't have, nobody's taking suggestions, it's just basically staff-driven at this point. So I'm wondering whether that's not something, when you're talking about going around looking at issues and holes, and City Manager Ecker said, you know, existing, where are the pedestrian gaps, whether that's not something that could also be part of that analysis.
Anybody disagree with that?
Not entirely at all, but they are at least providing public forums for that kind of thing. Now, are they convenient or Birmingham-centric? Always? No. but there's been surveys and public meetings and things, one in Birmingham, which was really nice. But at a minimum, they're at least providing public forums, so it's not, I don't know how to say this, you're not saying this either, but it's not just staff providing feedback for the whole thing either, so.
No, but I'm saying, but there's no board that's bird dogging it, that's following what's going on, that's keeping, making updates, that there's just, it's
And
just.
the part of what you said that intrigued me was going around the city and finding the holes, finding where there's, we need a crosswalk, we need a section of sidewalk put in, where cars are cutting through here, what can we do about that? Cars are going too fast over there, what can we do about that? Lord knows there's plenty of complaints, right? Could you feed them a monthly, probably, right?
Absolutely.
Are you guys aware?
We have spent a significant portion of our time reviewing traffic studies and discussing
And complaints?
residents' complaints
Okay.
and going over data that Captain Kern has
And I'll bet you that's the
prepared
funnest
and-
part of
yeah.
your job.
Yeah, it's
Beats reviewing Wimbledon,
yeah,
right?
sure.
And if that's where we're gonna go, like, fine, that's what we wanna know. It is, though, the complaints heavily car-centered, again, which is kind of the question we're asking is, do we wanna be the traffic and safety board again, with a little bit of bikes and peds thrown in? Or do we want to let the engineers help us more
Right.
with the car portions, the traffic engineers, the consultants, our
Right.
staff, and we shift our focus, this is a question, to the impacts on bikes and peds specifically. So if they're gonna reduce
Which
speed.
is safety.
And
Yeah, it's
I
not
would like
obvious to me that those
And
things
crosswalks.
are.
Hold on.
course.
My answer to that very quickly is the level of complaints we get about speed and cut through traffic and all that indicates that that we're not doing a good enough job, or that it's a totally impossible thing and nobody can do it.
I was gonna say, but when I'm talking about Big Woodward, like the pedestrian part of it is signal timing and, that kind of thing, that I'm not sure where that lives at this point.
Okay, everybody.
Don't we struggle with that one because that's an MDOT? We don't really get enough of a say on that one as
Commissioner
it is.
Kozlowski.
Yeah, I was just going to say to Nick's comment, I think that when most people complain about, auto traffic speeding through their neighborhoods, I feel like they are actually making a pedestrian and cycling complaint. I feel like their complaint is not like I'm getting tailgated.
Very
Their
good
complaint
point.
is like my kids are playing outside and they're riding their bikes and I'm afraid they're going to try to cross the street and somebody's going to blow past a stop sign and hit them, right? And I feel like that is really like slowing the cars down is the pedestrian and cycling improvement. And we talked about cycling. We talked about how the quality of roads affects the quality of cycling, and the speed of the traffic in the neighborhoods affects the quality of cycling. If you want to be, the sidewalks are really not wide enough to accommodate bicycles safely. And the streets, if people are driving 30 miles an hour, it's not safe for them to ride there either. So bikes are, and we're just like not going to put bikes everywhere in Birmingham. Like the roads aren't that wide, which is good. But it means that we should be aiming to slow the speeds of to slow the speeds of the streets down in order to make the cyclists approximate the automobile speeds. So I think that these things are all linked, especially if we want to consider the roads to be a shared space for cyclists and automobiles. Then getting them to approximately the same speed on those streets is going to be, I think, essential for safety.
I would step carefully on that statement of approximating speeds because
Hold on,
I've had
I'm
e-bikes
sorry.
blow past me.
Oh yeah,
What? Just some semblance of order. Commissioner Long, you had your hand up.
So those types of discussions and thoughts could be part of the updating the multimodal transportation plan.
To Commissioner Kozlowski's point, I think it's a very good point. We've been frustrated by our inability to at least launch speed bumps or humps because the benchmark that we measure against is the People's Republic of Ann Arbor. And, but yet our homeowners see what's gone on in Beverly Hills, in Royal Oak, and I can see, they don't meet those thresholds. So we as a multimodal board should basically, push the envelope, I would say, to say, look, despite engineering's recommendations, let's do a trial. Let's put some speed bumps here and see what the impact is.
We already deliberated as a board. I don't know if it was before your tenure. I mean, certainly we could look at it again, but I think we had some pretty healthy discussion and with engineering and understanding where those bumps would be and on a particular street, what would be the effect to the homeowners who had those bumps in the front of their home. We heard from public safety on their inability to plow roads, and so that was just my point, that it's already been deliberated by the Multi-Modal Transportation Board, which isn't to say it wouldn't be under consideration.
But we've had zero result, and the homeowners are upset.
And so the
As a
idea that the
result.
multimodal board could hear the homeowner complaints and address them in some way, whether it's speed bumps or something else, right? Commissioner Haig.
I'm with him. Do it. I've advocated for it for a long time as well, because honestly, we've deliberated it
Are you
before
with him about what?
on the do a test and allow the multimodal board to pick the correct location.
And that's not what we're talking about. I mean, that's fine as an example.
It is,
we're
but
talking
I
about
want
the
to
function of
quantify
the
it.
board. Okay, go ahead.
The quantification is that then allows them to have data to work with. The fact that we are benchmarking against somewhere else, and there are so many other communities around us that do it, we need to understand why they chose to do it versus not doing it. We need to see what their criteria are that are different to ours, because
So-
apparently they don't have the issues with plowing or emergency services.
So right now,
So this is a
our
perfect use
I think
case.
if I may, I think I know what you're saying. Right now, our repository of data, you take the parking committee, for example, made some important moves to collect data. Right now, the police department, correct, maintains most of the data. Do you maintain data on traffic, the kind of stuff that he's talking about? Or does our traffic consultant?
We
should-
do bike and pedestrian counts on a
Right.
regular basis.
Is that sort of, do you guys have access to that information? You get it when you need it, he gets it from them and they give it to you?
Don't we do traffic counts as well? Don't you pick 2 streets every year? I've seen the black Pelican boxes chained to trees.
We
Does-
do, yeah, from spring to fall, we do 2 streets per week to
Okay.
get updated counts on the residential streets.
Okay, I thought you did. So there is data that exists on an annualized basis as well that could be shared for interpretation with the multimodal.
So are you suggesting that there may be a need for, I think they collect data on an as-needed basis. Are you suggesting that we ought to collect data on some broad basis and have
Start with
more
the
of
data
it?
that exists, have that analyzed for maybe a different set of requirements by the multimodal board to allow them to propose a solution for an experiment. Because if we don't try doing something different, we are supporting the observation of futility. We're just
But
doing the same
this
thing.
data
we
could
get the same
apply to a
answers.
lot of things, not just speed bumps. I mean, it could apply.
I pick
apply to
speed bump because it works elsewhere. It's just an example. As you said, it's an example. You start with one. So we
But
start with
I
one
think it's-
example, and that may be the example for them to take as a specific task using data that we know that exists, that the police department takes for many reasons. This is one way of extracting usable information from something that is statistically significant, because it's going to be same street, different years, you name it, patterns will emerge. Let them have at it. Give them the opportunity, because if we don't, again, it's not addressing multimodal.
Are,
Base-
are there, so data collection becomes a task, right?
Yeah, so we already do, like I said, spring to fall, we do 2 streets per week, all the way from spring to fall. So we currently do that, we rotate the residential streets.
Counts and
Correct.
speed?
Correct. Speed
Count-
volume.
Speed and volume. Or is there other data that anyone here suggests we collect besides speed and volume?
The GPS company TomTom is making their data available, so instead of hanging the boxes, you could just have ubiquitous data.
And is that more than just speed and volume? Is there?
I don't know, I mean, I'm sure it's at least speed and volume, but it's more to the point, it's every minute of every day on every street.
Well, and I think they also can give you basically like people's entire trip routes. So you can get some sense of where people are coming from and where they are going to, not just a car passed this street at this time going this speed. You know where that street came from and where they eventually ended up, or where that car came from and where they eventually ended up.
In the
I believe.
There's Strava
I've
that
limited-
does that as well, so that people map their bike routes and their
Are
jogging.
you
routes.
guys aware of
That's
this
how Google
data
does all of
source?
their mapping.
No? Maybe?
So it's pretty new, I think. I don't know.
I wasn't.
Yeah, it's fairly new. I'm advising a grad student and she's looking into it now. I can get more information. But it might be
It
something
sounds
for the
very
mobility
interesting.
board to investigate.
So Census has a lot of that data public as well.
Point of order to get back to your question.
Yeah, okay.
Which is then, if we were starting from scratch, Mayor Baller, people are suggesting that this type of pedestrian safety
Advocacy.
advocacy, usability, friendliness would be part of their role.
Mm-hmm. Using.
Not just pedestrian. I'd like to see it
Vehicular as
involve.
well.
Well, pedestrian affected by the vehicular activity. How does the vehicular activity affect the pedestrian environment?
Well, do bikes count as vehicular?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure it protects both bike riders and pedestrians.
Probably wheelchairs too.
School buses.
So,
Mr. Davies.
coming back to the role of the board though, the Woodward diet seems huge, and it feels like when you talk to the people from MDOT about what they don't really know where it's going yet, even which side of the road the buses are going to stop, you know. They haven't quite figured out which way that's going to, but you can sense that they're going to select their stops based on per mile or whatever it's going to be, and it may not line up with where we want our bike routes to go and our traffic and things. So it feels like we would have an advantage to try and get that blended so it works as a system, you know. There's no point having cross buses missing where the vertical buses are going and things like that. And likewise, there's plenty of bus stops that have been very much improved nowadays. When I first moved here, you'd get off a bus stop and you'd be standing in the puddle and it'd be 10 yards before the nearest sidewalk. I mean, there's lots of examples like that, yeah. So I think having the board at least trying to get involved in those sort of decisions and maybe how it would work holistically, the whole system, may be advantageous.
And part of the overarching question for me that we've asked at the start was how does this stuff get to the multimodal board? What sort of guardrails are there? In the past, we've been working towards implementing a plan. And from time to time, a road project comes up and we've been reviewing that as directed by the commission. So in its advisory capacity, something like a speed bump study, do you want us to just organically start to do those things and work on those projects independently and then bring it to you when you're ready? Or do you want to have some oversight so that you can kind of manage what the board gets, manage staff inputs, because this is all going to take staff inputs for all of this stuff, and have that kind of oversight? It's confusing to me.
Well,
what
the planning
what
board used to have a priority list.
an action list, yeah.
Action list, priority list, whatever. I mean, something like a priority list. Like, we're not.
So developing an action list together for the course of a year. Say these are the things we're going to be looking at over the course of a year.
But I still think you need a framework for what you want the role of.
Otherwise, we'll be doing, and it's not a problem.
Yeah.
It's just we'll be doing, you name it, in March, and you name it in September, and it's hard to understand what we're working towards right now. So
Is it fair to say that what has been said tonight is that the multimodal board feels that its role is to look at how all of the different modes are impacted and to make it and fine tune it and refine it as much as possible to make sure that bicyclists are considered, walkers are considered, people that are in wheelchairs that want to get to the accessible park can get to the accessible park. I think everybody agrees with that, right? And I think or at least I heard a couple now that maybe, and how that ties into other regional plans such as Woodward. That is something that the multimodal board could consider being involved in, as well as updating the multimodal plan and implementing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only real sticking point is who decides if the road's gonna be improved or unimproved. And I think that's a policy question for the city commission, but that's the only area there's really any disagreement on, I think.
I don't know, there's disagreement. You're right, it is a policy decision for the city commission to make that choice. Where my argument within that particular piece of the puzzle is we need to be provided as much data as possible that leads to that decision so that we don't end up having the debates that we've had in the past. Now they've been very frustrating, but they've also been constructive if you look at them in a positive way. But that's where I like the concept of matrices, like Laura suggested, to help narrow that down. It's like creating the cliff notes of the answers to start the discussion with the residents that are going to be affected. Here's a matrix of options. Are you even vaguely interested in A through whatever it may be? If the majority of you come back and start talking, well, we like C the most, then that can start guiding thought. But that's when it comes to us as well. To Mark, to your point about let the engineers design it, I agree that they have to do the design. Perhaps if there's an earlier point of input where the community that's affected, or the part of the community that's affected at the time says, you know what, we prefer option C, majority vote option C, then the engineers go, okay, we'll give you a proposal based off option C, this is what it'll end up looking like. You came to us and said, these are the features we know we want, these are the features we know we can't have. Go down that pathway. I don't think you were at all wrong. I just like this to help maybe guide it a little bit more earlier, and then it maybe injects a step, but it might then make it more efficient overall.
I just want to add, my hope is to work toward a process where we're designing a street years in advance and saying that in 3 years we're going to come into your neighborhood and do your street, and let's talk at that point about what it should look like, how we're going to do it, and then that's set way in advance, way before it gets to engineering, to doing the cost and dealing with all that, and whether that goes through the multimodal board or the city administration simply confers with the involved residents would remain to be seen. Nick?
And might I suggest that, I guess what I'm trying to get across is what I think might help the multimodal board specifically more than something like that is for not only us, but for the general public to understand why the multimodal board is reviewing a project. For what purpose is the multimodal board reviewing this street? Is it a part of a neighborhood connector route? Does the multimodal board say, multimodal plan say there's a sidewalk yet? Does it say it needs bike facilities? In our opinion, for right now, that's what I think is what's missing the most. Because I think we've literally heard verbatim at the commission, especially during Wimbledon, they weren't even sure why they were there, the residents. They had problems with the cost, we heard that loud and clear, but we were very busy talking about even what our own role was, and it was super confusing. So part of what we were really hoping to get out of this process is when a road project comes, and they may come, and that's fine, and we might consider cars, bikes, and pets, but we want to make it clear to the public why it's there and what this board's role is when we're reviewing the road. Whatever we get into, I think it's that high level. I think just as simple a change as that, considering the stuff that we already do, could be the most helpful.
Would the commission be willing to take on all of Poppleton? I mean, and I think you should, but there's another 5 years on the capital improvement plan on Poppleton. If you guys can take this on and make the decision as to whether or not it's going to be an improved or unimproved road, then once that decision is made, then the transportation board can deal with other things. We're probably spending half our time on unimproved roads, so if you can. I mean, Poppleton's already in the CIP, so if you can make a decision on all of Poppleton, bring the people in, bring them into the library, just like the MDOT did for the make the whole decision, get the whole thing done.
I'm not saying
yes,
we're going to do it, but that is absolutely what I would be advocating for. Let's get that squared away early.
Second.
But we got a lot of other stuff to square away. there's a member of the public who would like to speak, and I think it's reasonable. She's been sitting there for 2 hours, very patiently. If you would come up to the microphone and tell us your name and address. And
hi, my name is Katie Dobrowitzki. I'm a resident of Poppleton. I live on Shepherd Bush, which is an unimproved road, 826. I am mostly happy to be here tonight at 8 o'clock, but I guess to start, I'd like to thank you for your service. I know that there's a lot of other things that we could all be doing right now as opposed to being here, and so I would just like to acknowledge that everyone is spending their time on these issues that are so important to our city. And I wanted to speak because I've been listening quite deeply, and it seems to me that our discussions here tonight are a reflection of just how deep and complicated these issues are, that multimodal transportation in and of itself is a thicket, and that it presents us with so many different and touches residents' lives in so many ways. Nothing can make my neighbors madder than the idea of a special assessment, and I think that that in and of itself speaks to the justification for the multimodal board. I think that on the one hand, what I hear from the city is that the city wants a visionary board. The city wants a board in executing on strategic policies long-term, on strategic visions, where we need to advocate just at a high level. And I think that that's super important, but I don't think the multimodal board or the scope of the multimodal board should be limited to that. And I think, moreover, the fact that we can sit in a room, all very talented, experienced, trained, smart people, and talk about these issues for 2 hours, I think is evidence that whatever work there was in the multimodal transportation plan is not done, right? There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, I think, and whether that means we need to revise that plan, whether that means we do need to enable or enact the visionary part of the board. I think that that's something that would be, from a citizen's perspective, really gratifying, right? To have a board that is a big thinker, that is thinking about things in the future, that is envisioning kind of what the board could be, but moreover, what the vision could be for multimodal transportation in the city. But I think it would be myopic. I don't think that our myopic focus on the vision should limit the purpose or the scope of the role of the Multimodal Transportation Board. As a citizen, I do think that one of the reasons the Multimodal Board should exist is because it provides a forum for those of us who live here to provide input on, and I mean, somebody said it earlier, on solutions to solve problems unique to our neighborhood. And there's really not another place that I can go other than a city commission meeting to provide my input on something that deeply affects me. I mean, I walk on my sidewalk and I drive on my street. I have a dog. I walk the dog. So, that's something that that I think this board should be able to do. And moreover, in terms of all other key functions of the board, another key function of the board I think is that it really could and does, Laura, to your point, it could make the commission's life a lot easier. These problems are thickets, and I think that the board should serve as a funneling, should almost serve as a funneling function. Should take all of the different options within a matrix, however, evaluate value, however you want to do it. But at the end of the day, some of these huge problems and projects could be packaged in a way to make them digestible so that the commission can spend its valuable time focusing on what's valuable and what's important, as opposed to all of the minutiae of all the details. And I'm not saying that the board should get involved in the minutiae. I'm just saying that the board could serve a very effective funneling function, or a filter, almost, right, to keep us all focused and to keep our eyes on the ball. I also think that advocacy, the role that the board can play in advocacy as part of their function in making recommendations to the board is critical, right? Advocating for your former neighbor, for pedestrians, right? Advocating for bicycles, I think that's really important. At the end of the day, too, I mean, not everybody, and I'm not going to get into it here, but not everybody wants an improved road. And I think that is something, as a citizen, I need my voice to be heard. My voice is important. And I think that multimodal board, as frustrating as it is to deal with angry citizens and as frustrating as it is to deal with, people who are upset over some of the situations that they face, I really do think that by fine-tuning the scope and by kind of keeping a closer focus on what the appropriate role of that board is and what the board considers in advocating to the commission and making recommendations to the commission, I do think that we can go a long way in terms of eliminating some of that frustration. But by the same token, I think it provides a hugely important forum for citizens like me to come and talk to the multimodal board, because at the end of the day, those evaluations and those decisions affect me, and they affect my family, and they affect my dog. And they affect our families, they affect our neighbors, and I know that, I feel that the multimodal board is almost integral to helping the city execute in its goals. So I do think that a narrow focus, certainly I would be completely against disbanding the Multi-Modal Transportation Board. I think that would be a huge mistake. And I think that would be a huge mistake because you would lose so much. You would lose so much value of what this board has to offer. And so I think it's really important to keep it. And I think it's important to focus on, that visionary aspect of it, kind of the collaborative execution aspect of it, collaborative recommendations, but citizen engagement is really important. I really think the citizen engagement is really important. And, with the Open Meetings Act, there's kind of no way around it. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you for waiting, and thank you for your very thoughtful comments. Okay, Commissioner Hay.
Thank you for what you said, because when you used the word visionary, it triggered an unformulated thought in my head. It was very helpful. And the unformulated thought was your comment about 30 ports. So if we actually are to have a visionary board, we need to consider aerial transportation as well, because there are already complaints coming out of Pontiac about Amazon drones. And as you were talking, and I was thinking about what she said, I was trying to figure out how many times I see delivery vehicles in my street every day. And it's got to be a dozen to a dozen and a half every single day. So then I transmuted that thought to, well, how do I feel like having the Target drone, followed by the Walmart drone, followed by the Amazon drone? And if you think leaf blowers are annoying, you've heard nothing. Listen to any videos from the Ukraine as to the drones going overhead the trenches, and it's an incredible amount of very, very penetrating noise. So we need to have the multimodal board look at aerial transportation and not just ground transportation, because that's the next one that's going to really affect our quality of life. So thank you for saying visionary, because you finished the thought for me. That was really helpful.
Let me say I appreciate that. I agree with you.
How did we do?
I mean, pretty good. I think, I guess from a staff's perspective, I think coming here tonight, what I was trying to get across in the memo and then in my introduction, and I put it in the memo about the regional plans and the Vision 2050 and the Vision Zero, but I meant to have that in the intro, that I feel there's a missed opportunity to grapple with and tackle some of these larger issues. And it's possible that the current focus of the board is too broad. I think I've heard things mentioned tonight ranging from we need to narrow the focus to we need to add more on to the focus. So I'm not sure where we landed on that, but I think as staff I was hoping for direction for specific focus, because if you focus on everything, you focus on nothing. If you prioritize everything, you prioritize nothing. Time is a finite resource. In my short time as the liaison to the Multi-Modal Transportation Board, what I see is 90%, 100% of the time of the board being focused on what I consider to be traffic and safety issues. we can vision all day long in this room about all the things the board would, could cover. But at the end of the day, we do have to pick and choose things that the board will focus its time on once a month when it meets. And if we continue to send every unimproved road there, every SAD district road there, that's July through October of the board's time. If we continue to bring every resident complaint about speeding, about stop signs, about traffic signals, that's a good portion of every meeting. So it's just, it's nice to say we should do all these things, but we do have to make decisions, and we do have to focus. And what I think, you know, by bringing up the bikes and peds and the multimodal transportation plan tonight, I think what Nick and I were really aligned on is there are bigger visionary things we could be doing. There are novel technologies we could be researching. There are gaps maybe in what we're not considering, but we need, you know, direction to do that.
Could we just take what you guys said and create an action list? Like, a whole bunch of things were thrown out tonight that seem really high value. We could get our hands on whatever surveys are coming in so that we understand the kind of like resident feedback we already have. And then the other big thing I would do is just look at the state of Michigan and their mobility office and see what they're focused on. That would be a really good framework. And then we could just go through and choose, you know, whatever it is, like 2, 3, 4, 5 items from that to focus on for each year. I mean, that's what you do in corporate, right?
Time out, sorry. Thank you. That was very good summary of your thoughts, and I appreciate that. I feel like we should take a moment to kind of absorb what you just said, because it's really important. There's a limited amount of time. Everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. Super important. I think the city commissioners who are sitting here tonight, if you leave here with one overriding thought, that's probably it. And we have to take, I mean, you guys are the staff. You are, we gotta take into account very heavily your opinions about how this needs to go. And so I think we've heard a lot. You probably are going to have quite a time condensing all this. I'm going to go around and ask if anybody has any closing thoughts, and keep them succinct. I'd really like to hear from those of you who haven't said anything tonight.
I think there's just one item that we need to, like, this needs to be properly adjudicated at this meeting, which is that I think we're all well, you indicated that you believe you have support among the commission to sort of help us extricate ourselves from this special assessment district. And so I haven't made my opinion known on this, but I don't think there's any circumstance, given our mission that's properly defined as advocacy, there's no circumstances under which we would recommend an unimproved street. So, but I think we need to just, I'm going to point out that I deem this issue to be properly adjudicated at this meeting. You have said that you believe you have commission, you have a consensus among the commission that we are no longer going to be considering costs. They're not going to be brought before us. We're not going to be making decisions on improved, unimproved. So we can put that to rest at this point. And
well, that's a bold statement.
I would agree with
That feels like the opposite of everything that was discussed today.
You want? Yeah,
I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well.
Wait,
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
Are you following this? Because you're the one who has to.
I'm going to help you.
I think there's split discussion, but I think, yes, several people have said, look, we don't want to decide if it's improved or unimproved, or decide who pays for it and how.
And get embroiled in that
Right.
highly emotional and fraught discussion.
So there's
That's
a
my-
minority
that's
of
my
members
point.
on the commission and the Multi-Modal Transportation Board that believe we should be discussing costs. That was my point, that we can consider this issue properly adjudicated at this meeting. And I don't
We
think
don't
that.
adjudicate
Okay,
anything.
yeah, well, we have to move forward somehow in terms of what our goal and our purpose
And-
is, and city staff needs to refine what the ordinance and the purpose and scope is, and I think we're all in agreement that the majority of both the board and the commission agree that we shouldn't be trying to build consensus among residents as to what their street should look like, because it's actually not all that complicated. The continuum of costs is just unimproved is the cheapest. There's a stepwise function that add curbs, add the material. It's not all that complicated, right? So our job shouldn't be to try to get consensus among the residents as to, do you guys want to pony up for an improved street, or are you feeling, like kind of we need to just give you the cheapest option? That shouldn't be our role. And so I just hope that there's at least some consensus among us here, that there's a minority of us here that believe that we should be discussing costs or value, however you want to put it. But I don't believe that to be our goal in terms of our advocacy for pedestrians and cyclists. And so I just want to make my opinion known in terms of what I believe we should be doing as a board.
Okay,
So that was
I
my,
appreciate that. And so you just asserted that you believe that there's a majority opinion here among both boards that the multimodal board should not be involved in like dealing with the cost issues and deciding whether it should be improved or unimproved, screwing around with whether it's Cape Seal or and I mean, I don't know if anybody strongly disagrees with that.
I would not characterize it as that. I would say we're probably split right down the middle, especially if you consider our recent resigned board member. I think
Are we
the
including
feelings
her or not including?
including her, you would have it completely split.
Well, she's not.
Yeah.
You can't include
No,
her anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I understand, but if you're asking for what the thought process was in the past meetings, I would
Okay.
say it was split.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
I just don't think you can get away from having appropriate review of these designs and directional value until you guys have a citywide plan for how we're going to deal with capital improvements.
I agree. I
So-
agree 100%, and I can assure you that we are working on it. So.
Closing
again,
remarks. That's
what
where
is-
we were going. Yeah, right. That was my closing remark.
You want to give Josh? He hasn't had anything to say yet.
Did he raise his hand?
No, but you said you wanted to hear from anyone.
Well,
who
I'm
had
not
a
going to
comment.
call him unless he raises his hand. Commissioner Law.
I think that while the city is working out, the commission is, the things we need to work out, and looking at infrastructure, master plans and policies, I think that the multimodal board can be charged as their first priority revisiting the multimodal transportation plan, and then adding on what Leah said, looking at how, as part of that process, how it links to these other plans and opportunities to create the umbrella framework, and then figure out what we hang on it, what we want to accomplish in town. And that they could work eventually, perhaps in the same way that the planning board works, that on some meetings per month, they deal with issues and questions, and on other meetings per month, they have pure study sessions where they just do this big work so it does not get lost.
And I might add a question, that the new ordinance that we're going to be working on should not be shoveling them stuff as a matter of course.
No.
That's part of the problem, right? That by law, at this point, we have to give them a lot of this stuff. Commissioner Host, you had your hand.
Number one, it's so nice to be with all you people. I've seen you on video for many, many hours, and I don't relish the inflammation that you've been having. But we're going to have a streets workshop, And that would give us another opportunity to have the input of your board. And I'm praying that we'll do it early this next year. We decided about 10 months ago to have a roads workshop, and I hope you'll all join us and give us your input. We'll find out what the majority of the commission's thinking.
Is there a date for that yet?
No.
Okay.
No, there's not a focus for it either. Streets is kind of a broad topic, so. Yes.
An adjoining topic, for those not aware, Oakland University has been about 90% uninhabitable since before Thanksgiving. There's a pipe that broke, and when they repaired it, it created another break, and when they repaired that, it created a third break. So it was closed the Friday before Thanksgiving and won't open again until at least the 1st of January. So when we talk about if we get pipes out of the transportation board, that's fine, but I'm encouraging you to move quickly when it comes to the underground infrastructure. Those are 60-year-old pipes that collapsed, whereas the pipes that we talk about are 100 years old. Thank you.
Kevin.
So I just jotted down a couple of things that I think people brought up that they thought would be good things for the multimodal board to look at that I thought would also be good. I think the first thing people touched on was data. I think there's, obviously the sky's the limit, but I think there's a lot of core data about how many people are coming into the city, how many people are going out of the city, where are they coming from, where are they going to. So I think that kind of information would be great. Street parking, we get a lot of complaints about street parking. It would be great to have data on that. And I think that if the multimodal board had a focus on compiling data and making it available to the commission, when I was on the parking committee, that was something we did, was we started compiling all of the data we got and then producing a report that would periodically go to the city commission so they could get a very broad glance of here's sort of the parking environment, the state of the parking environment. If we could get a sort of state of the transportation environment every quarter or something, I think that would be extremely useful. Another thing that Ms. England brought up is being proactive about stuff. I think would be great. I think that a lot of the times your people just walk down the street and they bump into some kind of frustration and they just kind of grumble and go on their way. I think that if the multimodal board sort of had their eyes open and their minds open whenever they were going around the city and were just sort of jotting down notes of, oh, I came to this intersection and somebody almost hit me, I looked and there wasn't even a stop sign or something, can we do something about that? I think that would be great. And not even to mention vertiports and things like that. Vertiports, self-driving cars, I think Waymo is already mapping out Detroit. So that's going to be an interesting development in the next few years, potentially. We had mentioned how many things were traffic and safety. And I'm not sure, if a resident has a traffic and safety complaint, I'm not really sure who else they should bring it to. I feel like multimodal is the natural board to field that. Is engineering, should they just bring it straight to engineering or something? I'm not...
Usually it's the police.
Usually it's the police. If somebody says, well, there's a stop sign, because I've heard people say, 4-way stop in my neighborhood, people just blow past the stop sign.
Yeah, so that's how it currently operates. It goes to the police department or engineering department, and then we evaluate it. I mean, we get those complaints every single day.
I'm sure you do.
Obviously, we can't bring them all. We evaluate them. We see what we can do with the boots on the ground. We see what we can do with any change possible that we already have. And then, if necessary, we take it to the traffic consultants to do a field study.
Okay, so you will begin the process of a design.
We bring back to the board then to review the study to see if that's accurate or we should do anything else.
Okay, so maybe then that is a good thing, because then I absolutely agree with Commissioner Long that revisiting the plan and trying to figure out, okay, maybe what does the next 10 years look like, would also be a really valuable use of the multimodal board's time. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
No, I thought you were actually going, you said you wanted to talk to everybody and you haven't gone around the room.
Anyone who wants to. I'm not going to make everybody talk.
All right, well then, observations.
Yes, sir.
So, I think we answered the first question, should it still exist? Yes. As far as the things that Leah was asking about as what would be priorities, Commissioner Long's observation of multimodal transportation plan, yes. The other side I would say is, and it's a very broad statement, but if it is something that would influence policy, because our role as a commission is effectively to set policies. If it is an item that would be a policy adjustment, then that should probably move higher onto any prioritization compared to something else, because that will ultimately come to us for a decision. Now, it's an awfully broad way of saying something, but those are going to be the items that will have most influence. And then within the rescoping, so the visionary comment from Mr. Risley over here and your point, I think we need to have that rewritten and really look at everything in a forward-facing view, and that needs to come back to us, because I think we need to be educated as well as a commission on what the Multi-Modal Board thinks there really should be a scope. But I was really focused in on, if it's going to influence policy, then we need to think about that one, as opposed to a discussion of should there be bump outs on street X. That's some of that's going to end up being administrative, and it needs to stay administrative. Oh, and the decision as to is it going to be an improved and unimproved, that shouldn't be in the multimodal. End of discussion. Now, you can discuss the options, but you will not be making that decision. Period. And that needs to be made very clear to the public so that you don't get that kind of heat. Discussion is fine. Decision is not yours.
Okay.
You want me to? Okay.
You had your
Yeah.
hand up first.
So, rather than having the options and then the public getting excited about potentially options which are good or bad, it feels that when the road's identified to be dug up for the sewer and water mains, that at that point it's told to us, cut across street, it will be improved or unimproved. All that discussion goes away then. There's no point in coming with A, B, C, D and half of them improved, half of them not. You're going to get... The decision you end up then is going to really frustrate an awful lot of people. It should be right at the very outset, this is the project we're going to do. We're going to do the water, the sewer and all the other good things you've got to do underground. And it's going to be A or B, period. And then we can take it off. Because otherwise I think it's just unfair. You're going to get... Just going to ask them for trouble.
Okay. Anyone else? Laura.
I was just pushing for takeaways, trying to answer Leah's question as well. I agree with just the points of updating the multimodal plan, and I think that's where, again, as has been said, we can connect to advanced mobility stuff, and I think the best way to do that is by, again, mapping back to the State of Michigan Mobility Office. And there's a ton of that stuff going on with Central Station downtown, so I think there's like already things in place that we can follow and use to talk about. The second thing is just your point about policy. Continue to help with the big decisions that are going to the commission, because that's, again, where we can advocate for a lot of the nitty-gritty details of pedestrians and bikes and strollers and all the things. And I think in that it is really important to surface all the options for transparency. And then just the third thing is just, I do think there's opportunities to streamline communication in our meetings, like if we're gonna save space, like, you know, a lot of these like traffic light and stop sign decisions, like I would be curious for how you guys would do it, but most of that stuff, the consultants do such a good job, you guys do such a good job. Captain Carney does such a great job. Like in the corporate world, you can file stuff as read only, so you could just put stuff where we don't even have to cover it under time, but maybe it's just there as an FYI, and that would give space for other things.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one else? Okay. I just would say that the commission's job is to, we've talked a lot about a lot of different functions that this board could do, a lot of important things that we need to do in the city. Deciding what this board needs to do and not do is what the commission is going to be faced with. You know, you said there are administrative functions, absolutely. So the board doesn't need to be involved in things that are rightly administrative functions. So anyway, with that, I think we've had a pretty productive brainstorming session, and you guys come back to, well, should we be setting any expectations about when this might be coming to the commission, or should we just stay tuned?
I think you should stay tuned, because as you know, January gets really busy, long-range planning and things. I want to under-promise, over-deliver on that.
Okay.
If I may.
All right.
We'll
Motion to-
communicate it, of course, when the time comes, but.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.